Welcome back to the Angry Ewok channel. Today we'll be discussing something I call a rogue alpha strike. It has to do with using rogues in the squadron phase to attack, and then following that up with a first player activation in the following turn to activate them again and either pull them back or press your advantage. This is something that's pretty self-explanatory, but there are some finer points that I want to go over, and if you haven't seen this before, you might get something out of it. We're going to start off with a textbook example of this, and some things that you have to have before we begin is you have to have first player to do this. Also, you need to have at least 2, probably more like 4 rogues to make this tactic worthwhile, because you want to really be able to hit and get back, and you don't really benefit a lot from having more rogues than you have carrier activation potential. For example, if you've got an MC-80 that can push 4, I would never take more than, I wouldn't put more than 5 rogues in my list, because the most I can do is activate 4, 5 with a token. So you want first player and you want rogues. You don't typically get a lot of benefit out of having more rogues than you have command activations, but that can vary. As 2 fleets close on each other, there comes a time when both fleets are almost in weapons range, and there becomes a very tense standoff where the 2 fleets are trying to get in the first squadron hits by either pouncing on a ship that was slightly overextended, by jumping on squadrons before they're activated, and killing squadrons before they can go. But during that time frame is when this tactic is most useful, because you cannot really get an activation advantage in 1.5 due to the pass tokens. During that closing turn, the second player, if he uses his pass token at the proper time, we'll get the last activation, which is good. I love that rule. I think it's a great thing. But as first player, some people used to be able to go last in the round because they have a lot of activations, go first in the round with generics and non-rogues. Not possible now due to 1.5, but it is possible with rogues. Now, you'll see here the Star Destroyer is approaching the assault frigate, and the assault frigate has its squadrons hidden on the back side of it. That's mostly because the squadrons that we're concerned with are not big bombers. If we were trying to protect the assault frigate, we would have them out front, taking the brunt of that alpha strike. And you may have some sacrificial squadrons out front, some like, A-wings or some X-wings or something, to eat up that alpha. But the squadrons that we're trying to set up this rogue push with are hidden either on the back side of that or on some rocks, so they can't be locked down due to engagement, or somewhere that they're not going to eat a crushing alpha strike early in the round or in the middle of the round before we're ready to go. And then once all the ships have gone in the ship phase, they're going to go in the squadron phase. And so in this example we're using Hera, so I'll show that she can hand out rogue to the 2 A-wings, and you can see their threat ranges here. And so if these interceptors have approached, we can jump on them. Now if they don't, you can stay back, but hopefully you can time it out to where as the enemy squadrons engage and push, you can pounce with your rogues, and you'll see that they'll move in, take their shots, bang bang bang, and then because we have first player, we have to concern ourselves with making sure that those rogues are placed inside of command range. If they are outside of command range, you're not going to be able to benefit from this. So you have to be very cognizant of your placement of these squadrons. So when it becomes time to go with your first ship in the next phase, you'll hopefully have a squadron command dialed up. You'll flip that over, you'll activate. I typically like to have a squadron token on the ship too, because I'm trying to pull as many of those squadrons back out of the fight as I can, do as much damage and recede back, and then the end result hopefully is that I have gotten to hit them 4 times and then hit them 4 more times and pull back without taking any repercussions outside of counter shots. That's easier said than done, because there is no blanket intel from 1.0 that gets you out of engagement. So you have to use things like grit and Tycho's ability, or just straight out just killing everything that's engaged with you to remove yourself from the engagement. So typically, like in this example, we have Tycho, we have Hera, we have Ghost, we have Hera and Shadowcaster that all have some form of disengagement. So I'll typically move in, shoot, and then try to work myself backwards in the following phase to get out. For example, Tycho will be the first one to shoot in this round, and the reason for that is because he can leave no matter what. And so I'll pick a target, shoot the target. My goal here is to be able to kill a ship that I've hopefully been already chipping away, a squadron that I've already been chipping away at, so that my 2 grit squadrons can then be only engaged with one, shoot that target and pull back. And so then you work yourself down that priority list. So you would probably shoot with Tycho, see what happens, and if you feel like you could probably get it with Ketsu, then if you didn't kill it, you go with Ketsu. Hopefully kill the thing that's the second squadron holding Ketsu in place and moving back. And then Ghost can go. If you kill something, you can move in and continue the fight, or you can pull back if you feel like that's the right move. And then typically I'll go with anything that does not have grit last, because that way I can, have a higher probability of killing the thing engaging me and getting out of there. Again, you don't always have to be trying to pull back out. You might be setting yourself up to be in the path of that Star Destroyer so that when it moves, it'll overlap. That's another option. A lot of times I like to use that second squadron push to basically pile up in front of an enemy ship that's coming in, because I know that when he goes, he'll hit me with something. But then, and so all my positioning and trying to keep my squadrons free and moving with grit is going to be upset. But if he has to overlap me, I get to reset everything, hopefully after his squadrons have gone. So that's the basic premise, and there's a lot of fine points to it though that you can screw up, and we'll talk about that in more detail. One way that you can get yourself in trouble with this is if you try to activate your big carrier but you have it blocked in. If that CR-90 had been over the top of the assault frigate and it had no way to move, it would freeze itself in place, and I would then be staring down probably a very threatening double arc next round from that Star Destroyer. So you got to make sure that you fly in such a way that your carrier can activate and move and be in a safe spot. You don't want to hurt yourself or set yourself up by moving first with your carrier, because in a lot of cases going first gives away all the information about where your carrier is going to be, and the enemy can close in on it. So always think about that. Keep your fleet flying in such a way that you got movement. Also, in this case, my carrier is also a battleship, and so I would hate to activate my squads just for the sake of activating squads without having a shot. Like, for example, if that Star Destroyer was right outside of red range, I may very well consider not springing my rogue trap this round, just because I know that forces me to really, really want to go first with that assault frigate in order to get those rogues to go, but that will be sacrificing the shots coming from my assault frigate. And I know you're all saying, well, it's an assault frigate. Well, I typically play Akbar, but this can be true for any big rebel carrier specifically. For example, if this is an MC-80, a home one with a double arc sitting in on this Star Destroyer, same deal. You don't want to sacrifice your guns just to get your squadrons to go off. So that is part of the skill of flying this, is knowing and timing that out to where your ships and your squadrons are hitting and receding at the same time, and it all sings together when it works. But you lose a lot of efficiency if all you're doing with your 120 point flagship is moving squads. You're missing out on half of the use there. The other thing that you can get in trouble with is if you move forward and you don't kill enough, or you engage so aggressively that you get locked down by engagement. If your ship doesn't have boosted comms, or you don't have relay, or you're going really fast, you can fly outside of your command range. This is nothing new or different. This is true with every carrier, but you would hate to, in the following round, be outside of command range. So you got to be very particular about where you're going, and that's a lot of times why I like to pull back out of the fight with my squads in this application, because my assault frigate typically does not have boosted comms in this example, and if I continue at speed 3, has a high likelihood that I will fly outside of the path of some of my squadrons and not be able to activate them until late in the next round, and that can strand them. That can leave them in a bad spot and get them chewed up, and you don't want to do that. So those are the two major concerns with this. The only other major concern is you have to make sure that your carrier will be safe going first. Like if they're like, this is typically hard to do against an onager, because if you do this against an onager, you'll move out of the way the first time, but they know exactly where it's going to be and they can line up a good shot on your carrier. So just be cognizant of that. So just a real quick real world example. This is a game between myself and Clone Trooper 5 during our pod play of the Vassal World Cup. You'll see my fleet on the bottom, he's on the top, and I took first player because I was concerned about his squadrons doing a lot of damage if he had first activation, and potentially killing one of my smaller CR90s. And you don't ever really want to give an onager first player if you can help it. It's not a good idea. So I deployed swinging to the right and anticipating, looping in and engaging hard with my CR90s. And you'll see as the game unfolds how the Star Destroyer and the onager are closing in. And then you get to this point here where I decide to send in my rogues. My rogues go in, do some damage, and then I'm able to get them back out again with this whole first and last and then first tactic. And you'll see the move from the assault frigate. It was able to push and then do this speed 2 move that you see, activating those squadrons in the fight circled in red. They were able to fire, and then I chose to stay in because I knew the Star Destroyer was going to end up somewhere in that general vicinity. So I remained in place, tried to spread out as much as I could to try to mitigate Mauler. But that's another thing. I tried to use Tycho to pull Tycho out of there so he wouldn't take a Mauler hit. Tried to use Ketsu to pull her back to get her outside of Mauler range, because Mauler didn't commit himself in the squadron phase of the last turn. So I knew that splash was coming, and I suspected that flotilla had a squadron command keyed up and Mauler was going to come diving in there, and so I wanted to be as dispersed as I possibly could. So this didn't stop it. I think Mauler still got two or three of mine, but I was able to not take the big hit on everything. And that's a big advantage of this fleet, and the grit, the fact that I have some grit to deal with it. So in this case, I was able to pull back and set myself up, and you'll see the kill box that I've got set up at this point. And once we got to here, the Star Destroyer had taken a lot of heat, and he decided to disengage. And like I was saying, he disengaged because if he come straight in, he'd have got vaporized, and he sat on top of my squad. So I then got to rearrange how I had things set up and free my squads up, and that really was a telling moment in the game for us, because then his squadron firepower was effectively neutered, and they would end up, Ketsu would end up putting the last hull point on the Star Destroyer, I believe. But that's an example of how this can be used in real life. Rebels are inherently better at doing this than any other faction right now, and the reason for that is their access to Speed 4 rogues. They have YT-2400s, they have Ketsu, they have Corrin Horn. Also with Ghost, you can make rogues out of pretty much anything you want to. So because of that inherent speed, their threat range with the rogue push is a lot longer. They can more effectively stay inside the flak screen of their fleet and then pounce out, or sit on rocks and pounce out from there. Imperial rogues are typically speed 3, though beefier and usually having a couple more tricks. They don't have the same threat range, and because Imperials typically attack much more straight on, they have a hard time keeping their ships and their squadrons coordinated, because a lot of times that Star Destroyer moving in at 2 or 3 is going to stick its nose out past its rogue screen if it's not careful, and so you can create a problem there where they can bomb you, or without a whole lot of ways for you to stop it. So Rebels are inherently a little better at this than Imperials, but it's not impossible for Imperials. And you'll typically see Lando here if you can if you can make his slow speed work for you. Ketsu is good here. Ghost is good because it enables rogue, and she's a pretty good shooter if you can get her where she needs to go. She's definitely not worth her points on her own. She's got to be enabling other squadrons. So I probably wouldn't take her unless you're trying to specifically lean into having this tactic as one of your tools in your arsenal. I typically do it because I want to have the threat of doing this as first player, so that, you know, I play a second. If I see an enemy squad wing that I feel like I need to try to neutralize before it gets to me, I'll take first and try to employ this tactic. And you know, you can just take a bunch of YTs if you want to. I think they're very good. I think they're slightly undercosted, and I think, you know, everything in moderation. You know, take a couple. Some people take all YT 2400s. That's fine, I guess. I just think it's not. I think you're doubling down on their cheapness. I think you're finding something that is a little too good and like doubling down on it, and I think that's a disservice to your opponent to just press down super hard on one thing. Lando's really good. He's speed 3, so he has a shorter threat range than the rest of them, but his ability to fix dice is really good if you can get him there. And I've also seen this tactic employed very well by, for example, Orasius does it with Gold Squadron and Scourgs, and he's making a bomber contingent out of rogues. He's got like Lando, Scourg, Gold Squadron, and Hera, and you're talking about 4 double dice shooting rogues coming in at the end of the round. And if you give him first player and he can activate those again, you're taking 4, turn around taking 4 more and pulling back, and you're probably not in a good way when that's over. That was pretty much the crux of his Vassal World Cup winning fleet, not this year but last year, with his Starhawk. You know, he would wait, go in late with the rogues, go first or near first with the Starhawk, you know, and Lord forbid if you're dropped to speed 0, you're going to take 4 to 5 rogues from him, and then with no defense tokens, and probably a side arc shot from the Hawk, and then you're going to take all that again with no defense tokens, and it'll bore a hole through your ship. So, not my original idea, but something that I've seen a lot, and I think Rebels can use to try to compete in the air war against the Empire. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned something, and see you again next time.